Hey, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Bringing Digital Learning into the History Classroom, our fourth session. Today we have Richard Cairn from the Library of Congress, who's going to be joining us and walking us through some of the great resources that they have and really exploring, kind of going deeper and promoting inquiry with our history students. We really want to make sure that we're building that and establishing that within our classrooms and encouraging our students to ask questions and really challenge the text, not just respond to questions that teachers put out there. And so hopefully today, later on, we'll have some guest panelists. We'll see if we're able to get that going. And I'm going to hand it over to Richard so he can take it away.
All right. Thank you, Natasha. So what we're going to be doing in today's session is we're going to take a look at the Library of Congress website a little bit. We're going to play with a primary source because that's where I always like to start. And I'm going to show you a combination of some tips and the strategies for using the primary sources, for getting into the Library of Congress and finding things. And of course, as always with this course, we're going to have some activities that you got to do. So hope you all have your fingers limbered up, ready to go with that. Okay, so I'm going to jump to my slideshow here. And okay, so we are with bringing digital learning into the history classroom. And I am the director of the Teaching with Primary Sources program of the Collaborative for Educational Services. So we're funded by the Library of Congress, but I don't actually work for them. So full disclosure there. My Twitter handle is @EmergingAmerica. We do have a Twitter feed that you're welcome to follow. A lot of what we put on there is events and things coming up on our website and so forth. You're going to be using the Google Sheet for this webinar. If you have any trouble getting into it, go to Natasha with your questions. And so what we're going to do first here is jump into a primary source. I'm going to use a sound file. It's a song from 1914 or 15 called "Don't Bite the Hand That's Feeding You." So what I'd like you to do is to listen to the song, and you can go ahead and put down your name and begin making observations. And the observations column, just state the facts. Don't make any inferences. Don't say what you think is going on. Just describe actually what you hear. We'll come to the other couple of options in a second. So let me get to that song. And if you look at the agenda, you'll notice that the music or the lyrics for the song are in the agenda, so you can read along if you want to. Okay, so I'm opening up that file, and you'll notice it's kind of interesting. This particular part of the Library of Congress starts with a warning. These historical recordings may contain offensive or inappropriate language. Well, this one definitely does. So, so give it a listen. It takes just a couple of minutes here, and write down again what you're hearing in that. Here's the form, so you'll put your name down, and then I see somebody starting in. So first, just observations. What are you hearing? So here's the song.
If you are unable to hear the song, we'll see if we can turn up the volume a little bit on that over there, Rich. There it goes. And if you're having trouble hearing the file, the primary source URL is right there. You can click on it and play it individually and still respond into the observation guide.
Okay, so again, think about just what you're hearing there. So under the way we use this form, this is a standard primary source analysis tool from the Library of Congress. And I'll show you a bit later where you can download different versions of it, including one that students can write on in a PDF if they've got computers. So in the first column, observations, it's important for students to understand the difference between just making observations and beginning to make inferences. So you wouldn't want to say in the observations section, you wouldn't want to ask a question about, what are the politics of this guy? You can say, who's he speaking to? You could say something about what's his tone. You can talk about the specific language that he uses. But so first of all, you want to capture those kinds of things. And then you move into the reflections. And in reflections, you would ask exactly those kinds of things. Why do you think he recorded this? Who was his audience for this? Who would have bought this record? Some of those kinds of things. And then under the questions section, questions could be things that you want to know more about, like, did people like this? Did they buy it? Was it popular? Was this the only song like this, or were there lots of songs that were kind of anti-immigrant like this? To think about the context of it during World War I, did that have anything to do with the kind of attitude expressed and so forth? So again, I just wanted to jump into using a primary source, and that last part about questions is really key. When the Library of Congress sets us out to go work with teachers to use resources from the library, we're not just aiming to find things to drop into PowerPoints as illustrations. That's something you're going to want to do probably, and that's fine. But our goal is really to help students ask their own questions about a primary source. Who was this guy? Why was he saying these horrible things? How different is this? How similar is this to what some of the presidential candidates are saying today? Get them to wrestle with those questions and look at inquiry. And I would point out that that's what the national standards in social studies are all about, the standards for college, career, and civics. The Common Core is about college and career. Massachusetts actually just recently added civics to its definition of what students are supposed to be learning. So looking at national social studies standards and national history standards from the National Council for the Social Studies, they're talking about preparation for civic life, and inquiry is at the foundation of that. So it's about deep and enduring understandings, not just superficial understanding, and ultimately the goal is to have citizens who are making good decisions and who are involved in their communities. So if we're going to get there, we're going to have to start teaching students very early on to be able to analyze documents, and songs, films, images are a great way to teach them those analytical skills, and then they can apply those to increasingly complex written material. So this is just another way to look at what the national social studies frameworks are all about. Is on the first dimension there is developing questions, planning inquiries. Then the content-specific knowledge comes in, knowledge and skills. But then it's about being able to gather and evaluate sources, primary sources and secondary sources, and to be able to develop claims and use evidence to support those claims. One of the places to find primary sources, they're all free, and almost everything there is pretty readily accessible for you to use. So I'm going to give you a tour of the Library of Congress website, show you some kind of top places to go. Then I'm going to show you some ways to kind of mine primary source sets and things that other people have already developed. But then I'm also going to show you a little bit about some collections that you can take a look at that are particularly good ones, and some thoughts on how to explore those. And then we're going to look at really venturing out into the open seas and not following a map as much to develop your search terms and look at some of the search engines and so forth. And one of the things I encourage you to do is to keep an open mind when you're looking at something like this. These are real-world sources, not stuff out of a textbook, so you're going to find things that are puzzling or that you want to know more about, and sometimes you'll be able to find more, and sometimes it won't be so easy. Looking at, first of all, mining places to find primary sources, both the Library of Congress and our program has primary source sets. Last year we contracted with about 40 teachers all over the state, mostly Boston teachers, to develop some primary source sets that would find things that are particularly useful to you. And these are just two of them that are on our website. Our website is emergingamerica.org. And if you go to that, you'll see a drop-down menu under the teacher resources that says model lesson plans and model primary source sets. So these are two, one on the American Revolution and U.S. Constitution, one on immigration. There's a whole bunch of them. There'll be something like 30 of them by the time we get them all uploaded in the next couple of months. So keep checking back, or follow Twitter, and we'll send out notices about them. So when you go into one of these primary source sets, this is the one on the Revolution. This is just 2 items, and this is what you would see. You'd see a thumbnail in the upper left-hand corner. The title of the item, that's important to have the actual title. If you wanted to do a search for it on Google or within the Library of Congress, you'd need that title. A URL that will link you to the item. And then our primary source sets give you a little annotation to tell you something about why this might be interesting to you, why you might want to use it in the classroom. So these two are obviously things that would help you to understand the geography of what became the United States during the Revolutionary period. So that's the kind of thing we want to find, is what are some great primary sources. So again, if you go back to my kind of image of different ways to approach the Library of Congress, one approach is to hug the coast and use what other people have already found for you, primary source sets and so forth. So that's the upper right hand there. Okay, So let's go to the Library of Congress web page, and you'll notice that there's an arrow over the Teachers button there. This is what the home page of the Library of Congress looks like. It's just loc.gov is the web address. And the Teachers page will pull you right into, as I said, mining primary source sets and so forth. So when you go to that page, you'll see there's a button for classroom materials. You can also search actually by the standards. So you can look up a standard related to, say, the immigration and see what they've got that's on that topic. But again, mining what they've already got, when you click on that button, what you come to is primary source sets, lesson plans. You're not going to teach these lessons. They're all way too long and complex. But if you go into them, you'll find great primary sources and questions about those primary sources. So kind of dismantle them and take them apart. There's some cool presentations on things like immigration or the Constitution. And the themed resources collection connections are just a couple of more ways to navigate. The problem with the Library of Congress is there's so much there that it's easy to get lost. So we're going to leave my slideshow and go to a couple of different parts of the Library of Congress web page now. So I'm going to go to the home page. So there it is. And just a couple of things I want to point out to you. The prints and photographs collection is just amazing. There's all kinds of, these are some of the highlights of it. So for example, within this collection, if I wanted to look for Great Depression, they have the photos of Dorothea Lange and some others, as well as these are clearly some, there's some political cartoons. They have all these photos that were taken by the people who worked for the WPA and some of those programs during the Great Depression. So, I must be spelling her name wrong. Let's see, Dorothea Lange. There we go. So if you go to her photos, she worked for the Resettlement Administration. There's all this just amazing stuff about the Great Depression. So one thing I would point out to you, kind of my first tip, if you're looking at a bunch of material, so you do a search, you can go to a list view. You have to hit the go button, which always kind of throws me off. And then you find out more about a few things. You can go to the gallery view, which shows you, that's where we started, and that shows you more items and a little less, or you can actually go to a grid and see lots and lots of stuff. So if you're scanning for pictures, there we go. You guys probably all recognize this image. What you might or might not know is that in addition to that first image, that's the really famous one, there's actually a couple of other images, including this one, where she's not quite as sad looking, and she's got the baby or the child on her, leaning a head on her shoulder, looks very sweet. That one's not quite as biting as the one that's famous, so it's kind of an interesting thing to consider, the decisions that a photographer makes in the print that they share. One other thing I would show you, as long as we're here, is you'll notice when you're looking at the this is a catalog page. Every single item in the library has one of these catalog pages. And when you're on this page, you'll notice a thumbnail, and you'll also notice different sizes of images that you can choose between to take a look at. And if I look at one of these, it's a static image that I can download. if I hit the enlarge button or click on the image, I get this thing that it kind of floats around, which is cool if I want to zoom in and look at in detail. But if I'm trying to capture the image, it jumps around and everything, so it's harder to use. That'll become relevant in a little bit here. I'll show you how to capture an image, and that news will be important to you. So I'm going to go back to the home page of the Library of Congress. And so we looked at prints and photographs. I'm also going to show you historic newspapers. And the newspapers go from the 1830s to 1922. And so if I do a search within this section, you notice that my search engine has newspapers up there. And I actually want to go to the Chronicling America section. So if I put burning of Atlanta, and we'll see what comes up here. So it's giving me some interesting. It's got Birth of a Nation, the playing of Birth of a Nation, which of course was a really racist film that came out in the 1916, and it's talking about that. If I narrowed my search to the years around the Civil War, I'd get a different result. One of the things I would show you is that the search term that I used, burning of Atlanta, is highlighted on the page, so you can go straight to what you most want to see. Okay, so now again I'm going to go back to the home page of the library and show you, we were already in sound recordings, and what we were listening to was from the collection, America's Jukebox, which is probably one of these featured things. Oh no, these are individual items that are featured. But there's a thing called America's Jukebox where they have tens of thousands of items. Here we go, National Jukebox. That tens of thousands of recording from like 1900 to 1920 or so, 1930. So again, we're going to take another look at the home page, and I'm going to show you two last things. One is veterans history. These are oral histories of veterans from every war, at least from the World War I through today. And how you want to access these is to search. Click the search collections box over here, and then you could say pick the Korean War that you want to see what they've got. And they've got just under G, they've got a whole bunch of people from the Korean War, and some of them there's pictures and so forth. Again, just a real gem of the Library of Congress. And the last thing I'm going to show you is maps. Their map collection of American maps is unparalleled. And so Civil War maps, era of discovery and exploration, cities and towns. They have these fantastic panoramic maps that I'll show you in a bit. Okay, so we've done a lightning tour of some of the highlights of the library, but we don't want to spend all our time with me just showing you stuff. So I'm going to jump back in, and so one of the buttons that I didn't click on yet was the American Memory Collection. Those are collections, which means you're not just looking at all newspapers, you're looking at a subset of something. And these are the topics. Now I'll point out to you that you might want to copy down this URL and use it to browse they've been changing things at the library, and it's a little harder to get to this browse page. But if you go here, you can click on something like African American history, and it'll show you there's actually like 20 collections just about African American history. And there's a whole bunch of them on the presidents and so forth. I think they may have one on every president. I showed you all of those things. Um, One other thing I would point out to you, we're not going to take a look at it today, but if you're teaching world history or geography, I strongly suggest you go to a thing called the World Digital Library, and that's the URL is just wdl.org, I believe. And you can get there from the Library of Congress homepage too. And it's I think it's like 14,000 items from all over the world, kind of choice items that different countries have selected. National libraries from 180 national libraries have picked things they want to show off from their national library. Pretty cool, very searchable. So I told you about the panoramic maps, and the panoramic maps, actually, well, I will jump back out to that. And let's see, copy that URL. And so the panoramic maps, what they are, I just picked one at random, but a lot of towns in Massachusetts, including Boston, they've got these. And what's remarkable about these is if I look at the waterfront over here and I zoom in, these were made accurate. So those buildings, those are the actual buildings that were there at that point in time. So for example, I've looked at Hannibal, Missouri, and it's fascinating. There's even a person on a raft in the river, and it was printed before Huck Finn was published. So the person who did it was not doing it just to sell Mark Twain's books, so that's an example of one collection. There's hundreds of maps in this panoramic maps collection from different parts of the country, and that's all that's in there. I guess there's 1,726 panoramic maps in that collection. Well, you could send students there and say, you know, look around, and they're going to find, any student is going to find something interesting if they poke around there. That's one collection. Let me show you another collection, which is the Frederick Douglass papers. So you'll notice when I type in a title, it gives me an autocomplete. And sometimes those are really useful to think about, like his house is something I wouldn't have thought about necessarily as something to look at if I was finding things about him. But sometimes the autocompletes are really useful. So I'm going to say Frederick Douglass collection. Well, I'm not sure why it said that. Okay. Am I spelling it wrong? Oh, that's because I'm looking in panoramic maps. So I'm going to go back to the home page. So my goal here is to show you a second collection. So I showed you the panoramic maps. This is a different collection. I am a huge fan of Frederick Douglass. I could spend hours here. Students would probably be completely overwhelmed by this site. There's 38,000 pages of material here. Almost all of it is handwritten. His writing is beautiful but dense for most students. So I wouldn't necessarily send students here. I would go find something and bring it to students, but I wouldn't just turn them loose in here unless they're really advanced students working on a History Day project or something like that. So my overall point is that each collection is going to be have the things that it has. So you need to, if you're looking at the Frederick Douglass papers, it's amazing, but very dense material. So collections have what they have. So know what you're sending students to before you go there. Modeling a search here, I've done a little bit of that. I would point out that sometimes, for example, if I type in immigrants in the search box, the autocomplete tells me immigrants in, and if I type, say, China or just CH, it would give me China, Chile. If I clicked on that one, it would give me several countries to choose from. So the search terms might really help you out, or the autocompletes in the search box. And you saw that I was doing a search within a collection versus doing a search at the main page, and that I got a different result. So what your assignment is now is you're going to conduct an actual search. And I don't want you to just browse things. I want you to pick at least one thing that you're going to use in your teaching. So that's your goal for your initial search here. And I want you to actually jump onto the Library of Congress web page if you're able to do that without leaving the Google Hangout, and go search and find something. When you're doing this kind of a search, pick something you know something about, because if you don't, you could go wade into something very complex like that Frederick Douglass site and just kind of be overwhelmed with it. So pick something that you know something about initially, and then later you can use the Library of Congress to boost your knowledge on things you don't know anything about. But for this search, pick something you already know something about. And we're going to come back to the search terms in a bit. So what you're going to do is you have, let's see, where do we go with that? Here we go.
If you go into your Google Classroom, you should be able to find all of these documents listed right there as Rich is walking us through the different resources.
Okay, so Natasha, should we have them spend a few minutes doing this right now, or should we have them do this as part of the second hour?
So I think we can actually do this as part of the second hour.
Okay.
So we actually have two different graphic organizers that you're going to be working on. So the first graphic organizer that Rich was just showing you was exploring the Library of Congress, actually taking time, going and finding an example of one item, one document, one video clip or audio image that you would like to integrate into your classroom. And then what you're going to do is you're actually going to take that URL. Remember, Rich showed you when you click on the link for the image, and you're actually then going to post it onto a Padlet, just like we've been doing. So Rich has a Padlet there, and when you double-click on the Padlet to add a new document or a new image, so if Rich is going ahead, notice at the bottom it gives you the option to add multimedia. So if you click on the bottom where it says, and click on that right there, Rich, and that will allow us to see, you can post a link from the web. This is where you can take a link from the Library of Congress website and actually add it in right there. Okay? So that is one of the activities. Part of the reason that we're playing with Padlet, we know that Padlet allows us to really allow the students to interact. You don't need to create separate students' accounts. They just need to have the URL for the Padlet and really be able to post any thoughts, any ideas, any images onto the Padlet. Now, so that's one of the reasons why we're modeling it. Think of it in the sense of a classroom collection. If you want to do a quick research in the Library of Congress, you can have students looking for a topic, whether it's images, whether it's audio, and post the links into the Padlet, and then you're going to have a nice gallery from all the students, the information that the students find. So that's one of the activities that you're actually going to be doing today. The second activity, which is the one Rich was originally referring to, is the search activity. So if you look into your Google Classroom, and there we go, Rich pulled it up, is our search terms. So with this, really thinking about what keywords are you using when you're searching for primary sources. And so with this, and Rich, maybe you can expand a little bit more on what you'd like them to be doing with this assignment, with the search
Yeah.
terms in the Library of Congress.
Right, yeah. So, for example, what I really want you to do is pick something where you're going to be searching for something that you're going to be able to use. So, it's come up in Western Massachusetts that teachers want to know about French Canadian immigration to Massachusetts. There's actually there was a lot to Western Massachusetts, and it's kind of hidden. People don't know as much about it. So, I wanted to see, well, what's at the Library of Congress? So it's important to think about what are the terms that I'm going to find things under. So what I'd like you to do is to generate at least 5 search terms. So when I'm going to go back to the Library of Congress, I'm going to look at immigrants from Canada. I'm going to look at Quebec and Montreal, which might be sources for a lot of those people, Quebec the province, as well as the city. I'm going to look at mill workers because I know a lot of them worked in the textile mills. I'm going to look at something related to French language, French speaking, and see what I come up with. And then what we'd like you to do in the last column there is, after you've done some searching with those 5 search terms, is to talk about what you learned about those search terms, what was really useful. And I encourage you to go back and add more terms as you get into it. One of the things you'll find is that, an obvious case is you don't want to use World War I if you're looking for photos in newspapers from World War I. You're going to look for the Great War or European War or Germany or something like that. But there's a lot of that sort of thing of figuring out along the way. You may realize, oh, well, they didn't call them immigrants then. They called them something else. So, okay. Anything else, Natasha, on the assignments? We're not there yet, but
so we're not there yet. And as you're working through the assignments, really thinking about how you could apply this to your own classroom. Really thinking about how you can encourage kids to think about topics and terms that are connected to a bigger concept that you're researching. Lots of times our kids are studying one topic and they only know to look up that one word or that one phrase. They don't think about all the concepts that surround that topic. So really this is encouraging them to think about what's connected to big ideas in history and social studies. And before we continue on, I do just want to take a moment and introduce Garcia. He's sitting over there nice and quiet and nice and patient as we're going through. So Garcia is one of the teachers who did some work with Rich with the History in Motion course. So we're just going to briefly introduce him, give him a chance to say hi before Rich goes ahead and continues with the presentation. So Garcia, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself. Oh, we're having a little bit of difficulty there.
Mm-hmm. Do you want me to move on and then?
He needs to. If Garcia can unmute himself, then we'll be able to hear him. So Rich will move on, and we'll see if we can get him back. If Garcia can, and we'll get back when he has his mute off. We'll let him go ahead and cut in.
Okay. So again, I kind of broke the stream to say that's going to be your assignment, is to pick something you know something about, start a list of search terms, and do a search and find at least one thing that you think you can use in your teaching. I showed you the search box up at the top of the page, and you noticed when I was in the panoramic maps, there was a different search engine there. And there's all kinds of other places that you might find search terms that you can use. Oops. Garcia,
hello,
did you just
can you
come
hear
in?
me?
Oh, I can hear you indeed.
Okay, perfect. So sorry about that, guys. I had some technical difficulties, but
no problem.
Thank you, Rich, and thank you, Natasha, for that introduction again.
Okay.
My name is Garcia Dalzone. I'm a 10th grade U.S. History 1 teacher over at East Boston High School. And just to echo some of the sentiments that Rich and Natasha said, I believe the Library of Congress is one of the great resources that we have as teachers to use. I've been using the Library of Congress since I went to my first professional workshop, I believe 3 years ago. And I think the site is wonderful in providing resources for teachers across all content areas to really, really focus on primary sources. And the thing is that there's so many different resources that the Library of Congress has that I feel like is so beneficial to teachers. So the first thing that I want to speak on is the primary source sets. As Natasha mentioned, myself and a group of 40 teachers pretty much created primary source sets, particularly for teachers, and it kind of took away all the hard work that you have to do going through Google and looking at for different images. We kind of did that. We spent a couple of days kind of combing through the website and finding primary sources that are particular to teachers that they could use in the classroom. And also we did it by sub-genre. So you might find something for American Revolution, you could find something for the Civil War. We had so many different topics that we kind of researched, and it was awesome. And it basically, again, is to kind of eliminate teachers from doing all this necessary work, because as we know, when we're planning, it's kind of difficult to every day come up with a new lesson and try to find new resources. The primary source sets are right there for you. There's probably about 8 to 10 images within the primary source sets that you could use. And again, there's different areas that you could look at that could suit your needs. And I think in particular, another reason why I love the Library of Congress site so much is that the variety of primary sources. A lot of time when we're going to Google, we just find that political cartoon. We just find that image, which is great, but there's also the multimedia aspect of it. You could find videos, you could find music, you could find a whole bunch of things that you might not think about by just going to Google and just putting in for example, like the Boston Massacre. Like you'll find an image, but with the Library of Congress, there's different things that you could find within that Boston Massacre subtitle. So I think it's great. I've been using it for a very long time. And the last thing that I say that I feel like is very useful with the site is the graphic organizers. I know Natasha Rich mentioned it, but the graphic organizers are tailored to for the images. So, for example, if you're looking at a piece of music, a recording, you could actually find a graphic organizer to go with the music recording. And I think that's awesome because it's tailored specifically for that particular type of primary source. So again, I feel like we do a lot of researching on our own, and why do all that research on our own when we could actually have resources that are there for us for free that we could use and utilize and kind of help us in the classroom and ultimately help the students kind of understand and inquire and really comprehend the content that we're trying to teach. So if there's anything that you guys need, I'm sure Rich and Natasha provide my contact information. I have no problem helping you guys with it. I know the Library of Congress website is daunting. It has a lot of resources, but I think if you kind of just stick to the basics and go into the teacher resource page, I think you'll kind of find that's a good start, and you kind of find everything that you need there. And also, too, the last thing that I like about the Library of Congress is a lot of the images and the primary sources are cited. A lot of times when you do go to Google, you might not be able to find, where it came from. And Library of Congress does a great job of basically citing everything. So it's really good to kind of have know where your actual images are coming from. So that's about it on my end.
Great, thank you, Garcia.
Yeah,
and I think
problem.
I love the point on the citations. As the history department, we're always trying to make sure that we're encouraging our teachers to teach at any grade level, teaching our kids how to cite documents, really making sure that they're taking ownership for that. So that's an excellent point to make. Thank you, Garcia. And just so you know, we've downloaded most of the primary source sets, and on your interactive agenda, there is a link to a Google folder that has the PDFs all sitting there waiting for you. If you scroll down, you'll go ahead and see it right there, and that'll bring you the link to a Google folder. Everything's housed right there for you to access. And if you have any trouble with accessing that, please feel free to send me an email, and I'll correct that for you. And we'll add those. Yeah, go ahead, Garcia.
You could add me on there. I just want to make one quick point. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah,
The great thing about it too is that once you feel as a teacher that you're comfortable.
Unfortunately, we lost Garcia. So
we'll come back in.
Yeah, maybe he'll come back in. We'll see if he comes back in. We'll put him back up on the screen. But he was just making some excellent points about the hard work that goes into curating these resources that many of us as teachers are doing individually. So doing it all together as a group really allows us to access everyone's thoughts, and then we have more sets and more groups of different documents and different articles and different resources that we can use within the classroom. So we do have them already downloaded into your Google Drive, which is a great a great location, and I'll add Garcia's contact information into our slideshow as well, so that in case you have any questions about some of the primary source sets, you can go ahead and reach out to him. So I'll hand the presentation back over to Rich, and if Garcia comes on, we'll pop him back up so we can hear his closing comments.
All right. Thank you. He's great to work with. I don't remember which of the primary source sets he wrote last spring, but all the work the teachers did was fantastic. So I encourage you to check those out. So again, here's the assignment on developing search terms. If you've got any questions about how to do it, there's a slide in the slideshow that gives you a little bit more tips. So when you find something, you want to get 5 things that you're going to share. And it's important to have these 5. Now, whether you put this in MLA style or something like that, I don't care, but something you're publishing in it, you might want to get your students to use MLA style. But what you do need to have is the title of the item. So this particular one is called In Defense of the Union and the Constitution, and then it's got a little bit more information in the title. The year it was created, the creator, author, or artist, and the permalink. And the best way to check if the permalink is the right one is to open a new browser window, paste it in, and see if it takes you to the page you want to go to. And that permalink is for the catalog page, which looks like that. So that's the URL for that catalog page. And you'll notice that I captured a thumbnail. It's useful to you if you're going through a document and say, what was that document? What did it look like? What did that image look like? I really encourage you to paste thumbnails into your lesson plans and so forth. This is what you're ultimately looking for, is these 5 pieces of information. Garcia, are you back?
I think he's back, but his microphone is off again, so
okay.
we'll see.
All right.
See if we can get him.
So you've been
himself.
Okay. You've been to a couple of different catalog pages. This is what you're looking for. This is where you would pick up the title and the date and all that kind of information. What's available varies based on a number of quirky factors as to who happened to be entering a thing into the Library of Congress and so forth. One of the things Natasha asked me to do was to do a basic primer on how to...
Hey, Red back.
Oh, hi. How to capture thumbnails to drop them into text. And so there's some instructions here, but basically you hover over something, use your control click or your right click to copy the thing, and then paste it in whoops, sorry. In this one, I showed you the difference between non-wrapped text, break text, and wrapping the text. That's something you might want to choose. Again, that's something that there's instructions there if it's something you don't know how to do. And I showed you that you've got different choices for how you capture an item. And remember, I said you don't want to use that enlarge button, because that's the one that you get the kind of floaty picture that you can zoom in and out of. Instead, if you're going to copy it to drop it into your document, you want to pick the size that's most appropriate for you. Usually it's going to be a JPEG that you're going to copy. All right, well, here's actually the slide I've got for Garcia to pop in. So did you have a final comment you wanted to make?
Garcia, can you hear us?
Oh yeah, Rich. No, I think I cut off.
Yep.
Yes,
so
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
yep.
We can hear you now. Go ahead and give us your final thoughts.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, no, the final thought I was going to say was, oh, perfect. So as a teacher, once you get comfortable with the website, I feel like it's so beneficial if you could have the students then go on the website, because if you have the students go on the website, they could become their own historians, and then they can go ahead and look for information and research it just like you would. So I feel like once you kind of get a hold of how the website works and how to find different resources, have the students go on there, and you kind of teach the students how to go on there and look for different resources. And I feel like it just helps them out so much, because then they start to become their own historians.
Great idea.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Garcia. We really want to make sure that we're helping our students become the historians and take control of their learning, really making them accountable for their learning and have them go and research things that are interesting to them and really engaging to them and dive into different documents and different topics that grab their attention. And by releasing the reins, it's always a little bit hard with classroom management, but take the risk, take the time, let the kids go and explore. It's a great point. Thank you, Garcia.
And you'll be surprised of how much they actually like doing it too. It really breaks up the monotony of kind of just looking at a primary source, looking at text. It really helps them to kind of, like you said, Natasha, put the ownership on them to take ownership of their own learning.
Okay, thank you.
No problem, guys.
So I'm going to run through just some kind of quick tips, even for folks who are do a lot of searching for primary sources. Hopefully these will be useful. I spend a lot of time looking for things at the Library of Congress, so I've sort of distilled some of my top tips here. I'm going to go through these pretty quick, but hopefully they'll be new and interesting to you. So I showed you anytime you do a search, do at least 3 searches. Anytime you're searching for something at the Library of Congress. First, say I'm looking for photographs from the Great Depression. Do a search at the top of the home page, and then go inside that prints and photographs collection and do a search there. You're actually going to get 2 different sets of items when you do that. And then the third thing, I'm going to show you a quick cheat, which is that when you go to Google and you type in loc.gov, you'll notice that it actually does its own autocomplete, and now I am searching within the Library of Congress. So if I want to look for Chinese immigrants, I am now only searching within the Library of Congress, and I'm going to get a different result from what I would if I were using the library's own engines, and I'm bringing that power of Google to bear. So it's a nice kind of it's not even a workaround, it's just an alternate way. So again, feel free to mine the sources that are already there. Go to the teachers page. It's loc.gov/teachers with an S, and mine the stuff that's on that page, especially when you're starting out. Some of those primary source sets, you could just turn your students loose in one of those and have them write a photo essay or something based on what they find there. And I told you can do searches based on the content standards. One thing I have to warn you about, disappointing, if you come across an item and it says, like it does in that red box, larger images display only at the Library of Congress, that means it hasn't been scanned and put online for whatever reason. So these fabulous Spanish Civil War posters, there's hundreds of them at the Library of Congress, but they haven't actually made them available online. Fortunately, there's a workaround, which is that if you Google, like this "Esto es el fascismo," when you Google that, it turns out that the same posters are actually online at, I think it's University of San Diego. So when I do workshops, which there's one coming up this spring on the Spanish Civil War, we use the Library of Congress sometimes, but then we use the University of San Diego also. A couple of things. When you're doing searches, you have to go with what's there. Just because you think it's going to be there doesn't mean it really is. This isn't, and this isn't Wikipedia where it's going to give you ready answers. That's why I say do something you know. And it really helps to know the collections you're in and get familiar with them. Maybe my most important advice for doing searches is don't spend more than about 10 minutes before you back out and try something else. If you're spending an hour banging your head against a virtual brick wall, don't do that to yourself. Back out, try something else. So here's an actual case. Some teachers thought they were going to write a lesson plan where they were going to compare political cartoons made by American patriots and by American Tories. And they could not find anything. They asked me for their help, and I've actually talked to scholars since then. There were no political cartoons made by Tory printers. All the printers pretty much were patriots, and if they weren't patriots, they were run out of town. There's a little more to it than that even, but they don't exist. So if you're willing to use some British anti-American political cartoons, you could do this. But these teachers' idea of they were going to show that it was a civil war and there were different ideas within America, well, they were looking for primary sources that didn't exist. You can't just order these things up. History didn't, in fact, produce them. So part of knowing your topic, this is one of my favorite primary sources I've ever found, but the teachers I was working with couldn't tell enough about it to know why I was so excited about it. And so I had to have a bunch of background context knowledge. Now, maybe you do, but what I got excited about is they were studying Native Americans in Western Massachusetts. And what this does, it's a Dutch map that shows that the Dutch actually knew these communities right in the middle of the map where it says Nawas and Sequinas. They were in contact with these native communities on the Connecticut River before the English. And to me, that was very cool, but I knew what that meant because I knew what that meant. And the teachers were frustrated because they looked at this map and said, we don't know what it is. So when you're on a catalog page, there's some hints and things that you can use there. If you look down at the bottom of the page, the subjects, and you look within the summary, there might be some things. You can look at the creator and see if that person created other items that you like. Down in the bottom left-hand corner, it links to other collections. And then at the bottom, there's subjects of the US Army, the Constitution, Columbia, the lady in the picture is Columbia. And then this happens to be part of a collection of cartoons and prints. So another kind of going deep tool that I would send you to is to look at the researchers tools. I showed you where the button, I'll show you again, but I'll show you where the button on the home page was that said teachers. There's another button that says researchers. And if you go to that page, you come to this. And what you'll find is they have some nice collections for different parts of the world. They have some nice collections on things like maps. But then if you go over to that on the web corner and you look at the collection guides, you'll find things like this is research somebody else has done to tell you what's online at the library about John Adams, for example. And there's actually hundreds of these collections if you go to, again, this researcher's guide. And this is real research, so you don't know what you're going to find, but it's pretty rich, pretty exciting. I'm actually going to skip most of the part on bookmarking. This is the last thing I had. You guys all probably know how to do that. I would just point out that on the Library of Congress web pages, there's a little green share button. And if you use Facebook or you use, I don't think they've got Pinterest on there, unfortunately, but you can send them to Google Plus, or DLinHist is a social bookmarking system that you can use. So that's pretty much it for me. Natasha, what do you want to say to close things out for people?
Okay, so overall, first of all, let's just thank Richard for joining us today.
Everybody clap. Yay!
I love it. So really thanking him for taking the time and really organizing the presentation for us and having it be interactive enough that we can go back and explore the different activities and really dive into the Library of Congress. So your activities for today, and I'm going to go ahead and switch over. And actually, Richard, could you just go down to the last 2 slides in the presentation, because I'll just switch over to you. And in the last couple of slides in the presentation, you'll see that we have, just going to go over the independent work time, we have the assignments that are already sitting in Google Classroom, and I'll share my screen in about 1 minute to go over that. So you need to complete the activities 1 through 6 in Google Classroom, and that's including number 1 is just introduce yourself, and number 6 is just the exit ticket. And then what you're going to do is really take the time to dive into the different assignments. We'll walk you through the assignments one more time, and let me go ahead and share my screen now. and you will go ahead and see the inside of the Google Classroom again. And for those of you who are new, I know some of you are joining us at different points in the session. Those of you who are new to the Google Classroom, you'll remember each session has the activities organized. So it says session 4, Library of Congress, has all of the different resources that you're going to need. And then if you scroll down, introductions, okay, your second assignment is going to be that group analysis where we're all listening to the audio clip. Now, the link in the Google Sheets has the audio clip again, so you can go ahead, replay it, listen to it a little closely, record some facts, and then make some inferences and some questions afterwards. And remember, there's also the transcript posted in case you want to read the words as you're listening to the audio. We also have the next activity that you're going to do is going through and thinking about the search terms and the Library of Congress, thinking about what topic you want to be continuing to dive deeper in, and what words really bring you the most success in your research. Then just a quick question about the guest panelists. So thinking about what Garcia shared with us and what good takeaways that you have to think about in your own instruction and using primary sources. And then your final activity before the exit ticket is going to be actually selecting one of the items from the Library of Congress, recording the information, actually writing down what it's about, and then practicing posting that image onto the Padlet. Now remember, with the Padlet, you're going to double click on the Padlet, and I will show you again here. You're going to double click on the Padlet, and then at the bottom it will give you the option to insert a link from the web, and you're going to go ahead and post your link from the Library of Congress right there, and we'll get a nice collage of all the different topics that people found interesting and enjoyed. So that's going to be your Google Classroom. And then last but not least, you do have an exit ticket, and just a reminder that we do take your exit tickets to heart. I read through all of the responses and really think about how we plan our next session to ensure that it's meeting your needs as educators. We want to make sure that we're designing professional development that meets your needs, and that you can go back to the classroom and start using the skills right away. That's really what we want to make sure that we're reinforcing in these sessions. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now so that we can say a final goodbye. And this is also a reminder, at the end of the presentation, you'll see contact information for myself and for Rich. And after we sign off, I'll go ahead and add Garcia's information on there as well. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email any of us or all of us, and we'll do our best to get back to you and really support you in this work of using the Library of Congress resources in your classroom. And as Garcia said it well, really it's taking the time to help your students become historians. What skills do they need to kind of unpack these documents, unpack the audio, unpack the video clips, and think about what it actually means to be a historian. Not just answering questions that you're putting out there, but what does it mean to question history, okay? And if Rich wants to stop sharing his screen, we'll have him say a final goodbye before we sign off. And just a reminder that Rich and I will be in the Google Classroom. If you have any questions with any of the assignments, I'll be sitting in them, and we'll address anything that comes up. If you need any support, that's what I'm here for. So we'll turn it over to Rich.
Yeah, thanks so much. I love working with Boston teachers. You guys always bring such bright energy to your work. And such great diverse experiences. And I will put in a shameless plug last here. We've actually got some great workshops coming up in the area. I mentioned the one on the Spanish Civil War. We're doing one on immigration with Scott Wong from Williams College. He was actually one of the guys who helped write the new immigration citizenship test. He sort of snuck in as a progressive that the Bush administration appointed, and they fired him after a couple of years. But great, he did his doctoral work, I think, in Boston. So he's got some great stuff to share about that. So we will, watch the notices about upcoming events. We haven't started open registration for those yet, but there's some those and some other workshops coming up in the area. And all the things that I do, I'm able to offer them free, which is always nice. So great, thanks so much, and I look forward to doing this again sometime maybe.
Thank you again, Rich. And we'll post some of the sessions that Rich is providing in the upcoming weeks and months into the end of our slides so that you can have quick access and reference to it. But go ahead and work on the different activities, and we'll be here for support if you have any questions. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.